welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be making some scones. In the bowl I've got 240 grams of plain flour with 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and I've got a quarter cup of sugar, 60 grams of butter, half a cup of milk, and then I've got some flour in the blue measuring cup to use for rolling out the dough. I've got my rolling pin and the board to use to roll out the dough for my scones. When I'm cutting out the scones, I'll be using the cookie cutter to cut out the size I want. Or if you do not have this at home and you've got just a glass cup, like you can use the lid bottle of the glass cup or anything that just forms like a circular shape to cut out the scones. But I've got these and that's what I'm going to be using. Finally, I've got a baking tray and a parchment paper on it to use to bake the scones in the oven. To start with, I'm going to add the butter in the flour. Remember, you could either use self-raising flour or plain flour with baking powder. And I'll mix the butter in till it crumbles. I'll show you the process so you see what I'm talking about. It's always good to leave your butter at room temperature. So don't just get it out of the fridge and start using it for this. Leave it at room temperature before you use it for this process. And you just have to massage the butter into the flour. So you create like a, you know, when you've crumbled like biscuits or something, it always has that look when you're done, and the color sort of changes because the color of the butter has influenced the plainness of the flour. So you just massage that in till you get a crumbled mixture. And because I've brought the butter into room temperature, that was easily done, but you can see the crumbliness of the mixture as I mentioned earlier. Once you've added that in, you can add in your sugar, and with the sugar in the scones you can do it to your preference. You can add a bit more of sugar or a little less depending on how sweet you want it and what you are considering to eat it with. So I've added the sugar in, I've incorporated that in. Then the milk also should be left at room temperature, so not necessarily cold milk out of the fridge. You can either warm it up in the microwave or just leave it in the room before you start baking. And I'll add that gradually till I've attained a consistent mixture. And with this adding of milk, if you're ever in a situation where maybe mistakenly you've added too much of the milk, you can just get some flour and just pour it in and just till it becomes like nice and coagulated. But I always advise adding it gradually, just in case what you've got beside you is too much. Right, the dough is a bit sticky for me, so I'm going to, as I mentioned earlier about just adding a bit of flour if you're not okay with the texture. So I'm just adding a little bit because it's not that, it's sticky, and I'm considering when I want to roll it out, it's not going to be the easiest dough to deal with. So I'm just rolling a bit more flour, and yeah, this is perfect for me. You can, from the way you hold it and it drops, you can tell that that's just right. Okay, and then we take it to the board. So I'm going to dust the surface and the rolling pin with a little bit of flour. And one thing you do with scones is how you work the dough with your bread. You do something sort of similar with scones, but you don't need to do it for too long, just for a few seconds. Like you can just do this like 5 times, and you should also dust your hand with the flour because it makes it easier to work with the dough and it's not just sticking on your hand every second. So once I'm done with this and I've dusted my rolling pin, I'll just roll it a little bit, because if you're accustomed with scones, they're not flat, you know, they have that bulgy next to it. So I'll take the biggest cookie cutter plunge it in. And I would say you should put some flour on that too, so it doesn't start mixing amongst your pastry. Now that I've got these two cut out, I'm going to put it in the baking tray with my parchment paper. And I use parchment paper when I bake or cook because they are actually ideally for baking. Nothing sticks on them. So now I don't have to, you know how when you use a foil, you have to put your butter, then sprinkle flour just to make sure the thing doesn't stick, and then it still sticks. With this, you don't have that problem. You just buy a parchment paper and literally just place it on. So if I put this on now and I lift it back up, do you see what I'm talking about? It doesn't stick. And then what I'll do with the dough that is remaining, you just put them together again, literally, and you can use the rolling pin if like it's not coming together, but this is fine and it's at the thickness that we want. And I just put some flour on my cookie cutter and just use that again. So you do that, you can scale up on the quantity that I've used in the recipe to how you would prefer it to be. So depending on the quantity you have, literally just keep doing that till it sort of finishes. And then I will use the next size because the size of the pastry has reduced. Now punch that in. And yeah, now this is gonna, you can, at this stage, you can use an egg wash and just rub it on the pastry before you put it in the oven. And what that does is gives it that, that glaze and that glow you see with your pastry is because of the egg wash. But I'm skipping that step today. And I'm just going to put this in the oven for 20 minutes at 180 degrees. I've preheated the oven for a while now. I'm putting it in and I've set my timer for 20 minutes to take it out.